Welcome to today's explainer of the source material. What if I told you that most people, well, they walk into every single social interaction completely blindfolded? They just walk into a room hoping they'll be liked, kind of praying they won't get intimidated, and ultimately just leaving all their social power totally up to chance. But, understanding just a few key psychological triggers, it changes absolutely everything. So today, we're unpacking the true anatomy of social control. Think about the very last time you walked into a high-stakes environment. Maybe it was a super tense job interview, or a really difficult negotiation, or maybe just one of those unavoidable confrontations. When the pressure was really on, did you actually control the room, or were you just kind of hoping someone else would lead the way? It's a totally serious question. Most of us just default to hope in these situations. But listen, hope is not a strategy, especially not when the tension is high. The source material we're exploring today actually suggests a completely different approach, shifting from passive hope to active, deliberate control. The premise here is just fascinating. According to the research, right around 90% of people are vulnerable to incredibly simple psychological triggers. They are completely unaware of the behavioral scripts running in the background of their own minds. By breaking down how to read a room and command respect, we aren't just learning some quick tactics. We're gaining a really profound understanding of human behavior. And honestly, once you see these patterns out in the wild, you literally cannot unsee them. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, nonverbal dominance, mastering the unspoken. So most people are absolutely terrified of awkward silence. When a pause happens in a conversation, they panic and just rush to fill it with nervous talking. And this is a massive mistake that just bleeds away your authority. Imagine you ask someone a direct question, right? And they give you a weak answer, or maybe even a partial lie. The counterintuitive advice here is to do the exact opposite of what your instincts are screaming at you to do. You just maintain intense, relaxed eye contact, nod slightly, and say absolutely nothing. Just let the silence hang there. There's actually a famous old adage for this. He who speaks first loses. But why does this work so incredibly well? Well, it all comes down to a core psychological mechanism. The human brain absolutely hates conversational voids. By refusing to fill that silence, you're generating this immense amount of subconscious pressure on the other person. To relieve that crushing awkwardness, they will almost always start talking. And very often, they'll reveal the truth they were hiding, maybe lower their asking price, or just concede to your point entirely, just to make that discomfort stop. Moving on to section 2, the Trident technique, instant intimidation. Okay, let's dive into this incredibly structured, deliberate approach to eye contact. We've all been told to make eye contact, sure, but standard eye contact creates connection. And in a conflict, you don't want connection, you want focus. This is called the Trident technique. Here is the exact physical breakdown from our source. First, you look at their left eye for exactly 1 second. Then you shift to their right eye for 1 second. Finally, you look directly at the center of their forehead for 2 full seconds. Then you just repeat the cycle. It is highly, highly calculated. Now, you might be wondering, why would looking at someone's forehead be so incredibly effective? It's because doing this actively triggers a subconscious panic response in the other person's brain. When you stare at their forehead, it signals to them that you are evaluating them as a target. It breaks their focus instantly. It makes them intensely self-conscious, forces them to back down. And honestly, the real beauty of it? You achieve total dominance without ever needing to raise your voice. No yelling required. Next up, section 3, the Ben Franklin pivot, enemies into allies. Usually, your gut instinct when trying to win someone over is to be helpful, right? To do them a favor. Well, the source material flips this completely upside down. Don't do them a favor, ask them for one. It's called the Ben Franklin pivot. So if you have a completely icy coworker, you know exactly the one I'm talking about, ask them for a small, totally effortless favor. Simply say something like, "Hey, can I borrow your pen for a second?" Now, what's really interesting here is the psychological engine driving this reaction. It's built entirely on cognitive dissonance. By definition, cognitive dissonance is the mental conflict that happens when a person's beliefs do not align with their actions. The human brain literally cannot handle contradiction. So, when this coworker hands you the pen, their brain basically short circuits. It goes, "Wait, I don't really like this person, but I just did them a favor." Because the brain simply can't tolerate that contradiction, it actually has to resolve it. And since they obviously can't take back the physical action of doing the favor, the brain changes the belief instead. It tells itself, well, I must have done them a favor because I actually do like them. By forcing that micro favor, you are forcing their subconscious to literally rewrite its own opinion of you. They effectively gaslight themselves into liking you just to resolve the mental conflict. It is a totally stunning display of human psychology in action. Let's look at Section 4, the false choice, flawless compliance. So most people communicate using open-ended questions, things like, what do you want to do? Or when can we meet? And while this feels really polite, it's actually a deeply flawed approach if you want a specific result. Open-ended questions give the other person total control and completely open the door for delay, hesitation, and procrastination. The alternative? Offering controlled parameters. This is also known as the false choice. This brilliantly illustrates the difference. Look at the framing here. Don't ask, can we grab coffee? That leaves a wide open door for a simple no. Instead, ask, are you free for a quick call at 2 p.m. or does 5 p.m. work better? You are providing two highly specific options. It immediately shifts the dynamic of the entire conversation. You're moving it from if an event will happen to when it will happen. The absolutely crucial point here is that you are creating the illusion of free will. When you present option A and option B, their brain focuses entirely on analyzing and choosing between those two specific parameters. They're so busy making that choice, they completely forget that option C, which is simply saying no to the whole thing, was ever even an option in the first place. You win regardless of which option they pick, simply because you designed the parameters. And finally, Section 5. The rock anchor, protecting your peace. When someone is acting absolutely hysterical, they want you to match their chaos. To disarm them, you must become the rock of the room. And doing this requires 3 distinct behavioral traits. First, you've got to keep your face completely neutral, show zero emotional reaction. Second, drop your vocal register so you are speaking lower and much calmer than usual. And third, use only short, entirely factual phrases. So here is exactly what that sounds like in practice. The source recommends specific phrases like, I see you're upset, or let's talk when your voice is at this level. Notice what's missing? There's no judgment, no yelling back, no defense. These are just cool, factual observations. By speaking exactly this way, you act as a perfectly calm mirror, reflecting their aggressive behavior right back at them. When you hold that calm, rock-like frame, one of 2 things will inevitably happen. When they look at your totally neutral face, they are forced to see how ridiculous and hysterical they're actually acting. So they will either burn out all their aggressive energy out of sheer embarrassment, or they will be forced to rapidly de-escalate just to match your calm vibe. Either way, you remain the anchor, and you dictate the emotional temperature of the room. Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway. We've seen how simple adjustments to your eye contact, the specific questions you ask, and even how you handle silence can fundamentally shift the balance of power. The human mind is incredibly predictable if you know the triggers. So the only question left is this. The next time you walk into a high-stakes room, will you be the one controlling the dynamics, or will you blindly leave it up to someone else?